Welcome, everyone, to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me tonight is Anthony and Tony.
Mm-hmm. Hello, everybody.
Two different people. A lot of people, they'll say...
That's why we call him Mushu, though.
Yeah, Mushu. We'll say Mushu. People will think that Anthony is Tony, and they'll say Tony, you know.
Oh, it doesn't help that we kind of look like tall brown people. That's why. I mean, he used to wear glasses, too. So
he did. He used to wear glasses, but now he's got a normal haircut, and you have the broccoli head.
I've always had the broccoli head.
It's never looked
on my driver's license.
I think you look better without it. You look more professional. But
how was the cop supposed to recognize me without it?
They're like, you again? You just hand them your weed. Here you go. They're like, sir, you have a problem. You're like, these are actually legal. This is legal. They don't dry it a certain way, so it's a loophole. So I can run around with this all types of ill crap over here. Yeah. Anyway, no, that's a true thing, folks. They actually do that. They make the marijuana to where it's like,
I don't know
so
if
it's
they
legal.
cut it early. Or
well, they don't dry it or something like that.
They do a process, which is it's
some
still
kind of
technically
loophole.
marijuana, but because of a certain process, it technically doesn't count.
Well, all I know is some guy gave me a pack of gummies called Ghost, and I thought that it was like CBD or whatever about 3 or 4 months ago, and I thought I was going to become a ghost. I almost became part of the paranormal folks. Like, he was dedicated to his craft. Like,
yeah, some of those will give you a panic attack real quick.
oh, it was beyond. I was dizzy. I couldn't stand up.
I don't know how you used to take them to go to sleep, because I tried one of those. It made me feel like bad.
Yeah, they're horrible.
But those are CBD though.
That's the thing about those like CBD gummies is that like it's wildly different from like brand to brand. Like it really is.
Yeah, you don't know
what you're getting.
Yeah. They're not sitting there regulating each gummy. Oh, wait, this gummy has too much. Let's make sure that we don't want to send them into the spirit world, you know.
Definitely not a factory producing them. It's Timmy in his workshop.
It's Timmy and Tommy, and they're in there just, and they have some little house elves helping them do it or whatever.
Yeah.
So, folks, if you're only listening to us on the Spotify or whatever platform of your choice, you're missing out. You got to join YouTube. Get on the YouTube train, because we're now on YouTube like 3 to 4 times a week, and we are putting out some episodes, and we've had some really amazing stuff coming out lately. This story is something that I had been needing to do. We had the whole thing with Monica Rollins for 3 weeks, and then we missed a week or whatever. So my friend Mark, I call him Scotty because he's Scottish. He tried to call me Amerikie, which I said that doesn't have the same appeal. You can't do that. And so,
it's kind of lame.
It's pretty lame. And he was just like, how would you like it if I called you that? I said, you can call me whatever the hell you want. I don't care. I already got your stories, bro. So that's all that matters. Now, he's a cool guy. He's a really cool guy. I met him through Ben. Y'all know Ben. You met Ben years ago when he used to run that aquarium place. Mm-hmm. He's an archeologist, and it's pretty cool. Him and Morgana. Morgana's working in Egypt, and Ben was working with Scotty. He hates it when I call him that. I'm going to keep calling you that, laddie. But him and Scotty were working down in the Yucatan. And so Mark didn't know, like, when this okay, so let's give some backstory here. And I'm not going to go into, because we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go into, like, join the Patreon, folks. Okay, just look it up. It's $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier. You get a bunch of stuff. We don't have time.
Look in the description. Everything you need is in the description.
It's always in the description.
It's in every
folks.
description.
Yeah.
So if there's something you need, go to the description.
Every 2 weeks, you get an extra episode on the Patreon. So, anyways, we got to jump right into this. So, and we end up having to just continue this. It's pretty in depth. So, I wanted to get this one out on the podcast because it goes to YouTube and then 15 other platforms. So that is important to me because this episode is just crazy. So what ended up happening? If you listened to the Mummy episode, you really got to go back and listen to that one, because these are some of the same people, but not the same people. It didn't happen to Morgana or to Ben I don't know if I had said anything about Ray. Ray was one of their friends, but Ray told me, because I met them through Ben. They said, dude, if you're doing stories about the weird stuff that happens on these digs, he goes, it happens a lot. More than you would know, because science tells us, hey, this isn't real. These are just mummies. They're just deceased people. Nothing to see here. Because if you go around saying that you saw the undead, well, you probably ain't going to be on a dig. Take you on the next dig. They'll be like, that guy was seeing old man on the wing of the plane, you know? So Ray told me, though, he says, you need to talk to a guy named Mark. And I did. Mark is from Scotland. And I've known him now for about 2.5 years. And so Mark it told me a crazy tale about when they were doing a dig on the Olmecan civilization. Now, I know exactly where this place is at, and maybe if you join the Patreon, I'll tell you. But I'm not going to just blab it out here for 100,000 people to hear, because I don't think it's a good idea. Because there is still an official dig going on there, although there's not a lot of activity. And it's really weird because I think it's almost like a decade now where it's still like an open site and they're not doing anything.
That's weird.
Yeah. So it's really weird. So Anthony, Tony, and I, we were moving all that stuff. And we had this big, heavy, long box. And Adrian, Anthony's brother, made a joke. He goes, "What is this, a sarcophagus for a mummy?" Open it up and like the what is that weird smoky dust comes out. And then we're like, and all it is books. It's just like paranormal books that we bought from John Bankhead. Shout out to John. I bought his paranormal collection. But yeah, it's just a huge box. And so
it doesn't help that we have that mummy mask.
We have an Egyptian death mask. So, and I collected that fair and square at a gambling party. All right. At a gambling table or whatever. So I'm joking, folks. So anyways, no, it was weird, you know, and Scorpion kind of made a joke about it being a mummy or whatever. And I thought it was, you know, fitting that we would talk about it, you know. So Anthony and I were driving and I said, you know, we really need to name it. We need to call it something because this is a giant vampiric mummy. And so Anthony said, we don't really want to call it a mummy because even though it is a mummy, he said it's people think of it as like a Halloween mascot or something like that.
Yeah, it's not really something that.
Yeah, so you don't think you think of like curse, you know, and you're like, okay, nah, this is an Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Yeah.
So you know, so it doesn't really have the same oomph, doesn't have the same appeal. But I told Anthony though, I said, but that's what it is. It's a mummy that was unearthed.
It's the same as calling Dogman werewolves. Though.
Yeah, exactly. There's a big difference between dog boy and werewolf, you know. So the mummy, we just said, okay, we're not going to really. So, but what ended up happening in this story that Scott told me, I say Scott, his name's Mark, but Mark told me, he said, man, he goes, we unearthed a giant. It was a giant. Most of they opened up a chamber in this place down in the Yucatan, and there were 7 mummies, but they were all not. Now, here's the thing: the Mesoamericans, they averaged like 5'4". These mummies were not. They were normal size as us people today. They would be a little bit larger than a normal. The average man is 6 foot, 180 pounds. These things were weighing in at 300 pounds when they were alive, and the tallest one was 6'6", the shortest one was 6'3", and that was a female, right? Oh. And these were mummies. But then there was another one in this other chamber. When they went down into this, about 17 feet down, they found what was once a ruler, an Olmecan ruler, they believe, and this was thousands of years ago. They think that it was 3,800 years ago when this guy was in charge of some stuff. And he did have like some very weird things buried with him. Like human bones. He was adorned with human bones. So human sacrifice was obviously very big on their to-do list. And he had a sword that took 2 people to lift. He was 8 foot 9 inches. When he passed away, they said that he was in his early 40s. Now, you got to figure back then, people didn't live to be that long. But he was killed, obviously, because the back of his rib cage had been run through by something. But the weird thing is the way that he was killed, It was not by like a normal sharp object that would have killed. It was very precise. It was like he was zapped open by something. And the bones looked scorched too. So that was weird. And then his head, I guess for good measure, was bashed in. And then there was silver that was laid all over his body. Chunks of it. Like somebody took like little chunks of silver and just tossed it all in there. And it was weird the way they did it. And then they put something akin to a slice of silver where his heart would have been was inside of it. So when they unearthed this, they're thinking, what in the hell is this? What are we dealing with here? And so what Mark told me, and like he is the only witness to this, so I can't say, but he is truly an archaeologist, and he was really there. I've seen the pictures and everything. But he says he took the silver off of this individual, and this guy was kept in a place where he was mummified. You could see him; he was mummified. Now, here's the weird thing: the people that could understand and read the pictographs of the Olmecans, the hieroglyphs, I guess you would say, whatever you want to call them, said basically that it was like, here lies someone. This is what happens to all those who do not pay their taxes. You're going to get in big trouble. I'm joking.
Don't mess with the IRS.
Don't mess around. Zap. Don't mess with alphabet agencies. Zap. Don't mess with your wife. Zap. Joking, Nelly, joking. She's not even here, but I'm scared she might hear this. Okay, so I'm just throwing out my fears, folks. But no, seriously, this what he did. He said we took the silver off of this guy. He goes, and then one of my colleagues, against the advice of one of the people who was supposed expert, said, "Do not remove that silver from his chest." No sooner had they said it than this person said, "Okay," and she took it out of the chest, and this guy, his arms moved. Now, that's not in and of itself a weird thing because of the way he was positioned. His hand was touching that, but his hands came down to his side, and there was no breakage. Like this thing had been sitting there for thousands of years. Should not the arms have broken? There shouldn't have been this malleability that was there. He said it was so weird. The bodies were so well preserved. He goes that they really looked like they had been embalmed with professional grade embalming techniques. And how did the Olmecs have that? It was very akin to Egyptian, which is another story in and of itself. That's a whole nother. Now, when this guy was taken out of the crypt and then brought to the surface, not even 2 days went by, and a lot of weird stuff started happening. Now, he just sat there. His crypt sat there exposed to the elements. It was made of stone. It had precious gems and metals on it, whatever. It took a crane to get it out. They had to really dig it out. And it was basically, they were told not to do this. They were not supposed to move this guy. And he was supposed to stay there until the end of the next cycle. Now, from the Olmecan belief, they were like the predecessors to the Mayans and, the Aztecs. They were very sophisticated people, but they were not on the level, at least we didn't think they were, of the Mayans, who had this whole amazing calendar, and they had this whole, mapped out the universe type thing, which is really bizarre. And if you've ever done any ancient alien research, they had like pictures of astronauts and all kinds of stuff. The Olmecans, though, they were so far back in history that we don't really know. But there is a village that was right there close by, village, and it had less than 200 people, basically, and they kind of were scattered around this region, this jungle, and it wasn't a cohesive, like tight-knit village. It was just like little houses that were, like I said, scattered around the jungle. There was a woman that came, and her name was Marcella. When she came, she told them She's like, she was a seer. She was somebody who was she was Mayan. She was literally able to see. And she says, I know what you've been doing. You've unearthed the devil, and now he's going to take his revenge. And she said, this guy was never supposed to be unearthed. And they're like, this person that she doesn't read or write Spanish or English. She can speak Spanish, but she doesn't read or write it. She doesn't read or write English. She doesn't know anything. She doesn't know how to read these hieroglyphs. She doesn't know any of this. So Mark and Sandy is his wife. They became very suspicious. Like, how does this woman who's very uneducated, she's the mother of 6 children, how does she know all of this? Her oldest son, who was 17, would often, or 16 at the time, would often accompany her on her like whatever. Reason being is because she was blind. She was legally blind, so he would have to walk her, and she would kind of hold on to the back of him as he led her out of the village and into this dig where they were doing all of this. And he translated a lot for her because she couldn't speak very well. When the way she talked, only half of her face worked because she'd had a stroke. And she was blind, and this woman was ancient. I mean, she was like in her 90s. And the amazing thing about her, according to Mark and Sandy, was that she didn't look like she was 80, 90 years old. She looked like she was 50, 60. And by Mark's own words, he's like, she wasn't a bad-looking woman, but you could tell she had been around a lot, like she'd had a lot of health problems. Not the least of which was that she claims, get this, the thing that made her the way she is was a vampire. So, according to her, when she was in her 50s, she had literally gotten attacked by some sort of entity, and this thing caused her to have all kinds of maladies, health problems. She was a seer, so she knew immediately what it was, who it was. It was a person in the village. She went to, the elders. They're kind of like, they have their own little tribe. And she told them, this person is attacking me in the form of a witch that's coming through my window. And they had a trial and everything. And this person was basically convicted and they were punished. Now, this person was put into the water. Now, whether you believe it, you agree with it, whatever. And I said this correctly. Her son, 17 years old, 16, whatever, and his mother is like 91.
What?
I'm not joking.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. She had a child. All of her children were older, grown, whatever. Now, this child was conceived, according to her, okay, by this creature that was coming to her at night, what we would call a incubus. He was the product of that. According to Mark, he's like, if I hadn't seen this, I wouldn't believe it. His eyes were completely black. He had no white on his eyes. And he was extremely tall and thin, and he looked like you would describe like an alien hybrid. And I kid you not. And this child had gray skin. His skin tone was so weird and ashen looking. He looked gray. This is what I was told. This is not no fairy tale joke. I'm not joking. No, whatever. Now this is what Mark said. And Mark, I believe Mark is not, he's a credible guy. I've known him, like I said, for a couple of years, and he's had some weird things happen, but nothing like this. He said that this woman claimed that this spirit or incubus or whatever, with that situation there, that's a whole nother story. That could be alien. I don't know. But she had an ability, and she told them, she says, what you've unearthed, you need to put back into the ground. You need to put everything back the way it was put. She's like, my ancestors put it that way for a reason, because that is an evil being. When she went to the mummy, she touched the face, and she revealed something that they did not see because there was a shroud there. She moved it. Now, the people that were working there told her, don't be messing with that. And get this, the Smithsonian was on the way. They were going to come and make sure that it was going to be safe. Of course, they always show up to make sure everything works out just right, right? So they told her, don't touch anything. You could break it. She revealed something to them that they had not seen in the 2 days that it was sitting there. She says, look at this face. Does this look like a human to you? When they looked at the face, they noticed that where the incisors should have been, like the canines should have been, there were fangs. There was a very pronounced jaw. The face did not look human. It looked more like, almost like the jaw was way too big. It was something that obviously ate meat. It was not a human-like face. It was a protruding forehead. The brow line was very whatever, and his head was elongated. So this was not a normal human. The fingers were abnormally long. The legs, the torso, everything was huge on this guy. He had these gigantic feet that looked like claws at the end of his feet. He was not a normal person. The eye sockets were large, way too big. He had a full mouth full of teeth. They said, I think they said he was like 44 years old. They estimated that when they got all the testing done. And then when he died, and he was in perfect health when he died, he was murdered. But he was obviously, to have lived back in those days and have perfect teeth, no cavities, nothing. And his bones were dense, much stronger than an average person's bones. Now, something that people need to understand, there are people who will say things like, how is it possible that these beings, skeletons, are still around? How could they still be blah, 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 blah? Well, let me tell you something. If you walk through the forest, right? And one of my colleagues said this, and I was talking to him one day, and he said, have you ever walked through the forest? I said, yeah, lots of times, especially before I saw the dog man. I used to walk through the woods. He goes, did you see many bones? I said, no, you're right. No, not really. He said, yeah, because they decompose, they get chewed up, they get whatever. It's very rare for something to be able to stay and become fossilized, or even mummified is even more rare. He's like, it's very rare for this to happen, for something to become fossilized or mummified. There have to be perfect conditions for this. So it's very rare that we find. So when we find bones that are fossilized or mummified, whatever, it is like lightning in a bottle. It does happen because we have billions of years on this planet, right? But for every one bone that you find, there's a million of those that didn't get found. And so this is a very rare thing. But according to what Mark was telling me, he said all over that area, they were unearthing these sarcophaguses. And this was not a rare thing. But the large skeletons were being snatched up. The government was taking them, and they were doing something, selling them or something. And of course, the Smithsonian was thrown out there. I don't know one way or the other, because the people that came and got it were all wearing black, and they looked like military. They didn't look like they belonged to any museum that he'd ever seen. And so that's what he told me. But this thing sat there for over a week. After this thing was unearthed, and this woman, Marcella, came and said, this is a problem. You need to do this, this, and that. The reports started coming in. The first thing that happened, one of the porters that worked with them, they woke up, he was deceased. The second night, that's when Marcella came, because they brought her, and she told them, this is a horrible thing. She's like, all of these are diablos. These are devils. Now, the other mummies looked very similar to him. They were his family. And apparently they were unalived at the same time he was, because apparently there was a coup or something, and they were very interested in getting him deceased.
They were about the same size?
The largest one was 6'7". The smallest one was 6'3". The shorter ones were female, and the little bit taller ones, I guess they were his sons. So they assumed that one of them was his wife. We had two wives, and then there was another one that was his daughter, and the rest were male, and they were sons.
But was he the only one who looked like a vampire?
No, that's the thing. Two, for some reason, two did not, and the rest had the same teeth, right? So, and I got to say this too. This was back in 1997, folks, when this happened. So, and so for 10 years, okay, so like there was a whole stoppage of work, and then it started back up, And then I believe it was 2015, they stopped, and now for 10 years it's just sat there. Half done, you know. For a while there, they had military that were there just watching it. And then it just became open. It's just open holes. And there's nothing, you know, and the jungle is taking it back. This is what I was told. Now, here's the thing. The first guy that passed away, he was a porter. He was a guy that worked for the dig and just went and got water and digged and things like that. Or dug holes, whatever. Operated machinery. He woke up, his heart had stopped. Cardiac arrest. The very next night, there was another person that woke up in the middle of the night, clutching their chest, come out of the tent and screamed. And Sandy, and I guess her name was Andrea, she was the other lady that was working there. They came out and they were like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he's like, I can't breathe. And they looked in the tent, and Andrea, who was one of the assistants, Sandy's assistants, looked in the tent and saw what looked like a tall black shadow moving around in the tent. And she said, "There's somebody in there." When she said that, Sandy went and they grabbed weapons. They had weapons and they had guards, and they woke everybody up and they said, hey, there's somebody in that tent. And they all went in there, and there was nobody in there. When this guy fell over, he got medevaced out of there, went to the local hospital. I can't remember the name of the city that was close by. Well, I know the name of it. I'm not going to say it. I can't say the name of the city, but it was right there, you know, to the north, and it was closer to the ocean. That's where he got medevaced to. He told the crazy story. A couple days after this, and some stuff happened in between because he went into a coma. And they said his blood sugar had gotten really, really low. And for some reason, he was really anemic. And he claimed that there was this being that came into his tent, looked like a very large, long-haired man with fangs, and that it grabbed him while he was sleeping. And when he tried to escape, it bit him on the back of his neck and his shoulder, and exsanguinated blood from him until he almost passed out, to the point where his heart almost stopped beating. That's what he thinks happened. That's what the doctors claim, that something took his blood.
Did he have the marks on him?
He did. The guy whose heart had stopped, they looked at his body and they found that he was missing about 4 pints of blood, leading to his heart not having enough blood to pump. And there again, they found marks on him. Then there was another person from the village who claimed that when she was walking to the creek to get water, because these people are really, really poor and they have to walk, and so they go in like pairs or whatever, because there's all kinds of predators. There's jaguars and all kinds of crap. And so they were walking and they made noise, you know, with sticks, so that these jaguars would, you know, they know that they're there. And they're like, "Oh, you know, if you try to attack us, remember, we made a lot of noise." Mm-hmm. And I kind of thought that was funny but you got to realize, though, these people, they have no other protection. They don't have guns. Like, you know, they're not the authorities, because in Mexico, you can't just have a gun, right? Especially if you're a peasant. So they think kind of like people with bears, like, "Oh, we make noise and the bear will go away." That doesn't really work. Okay, just so you know, jaguars are just like, "Oh, cool, a snack," and it just hunkers down and then attacks you. But that's all these people could do. And I felt really bad when he was telling me that. I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that's not going to be a good thing, because I've been to Guatemala and jaguars don't run away from you. Mm-hmm. They're really not scared of you. They look at you and they're like, "Oh, cool, food," and they'll come.
Yeah, I was listening to a story about this guy who does that kind of same thing. He goes down there for different reasons, but mostly to explore places like that.
The ruins.
Yeah, and he said like he was walking in the forest, and he says like you pretty much don't really see jaguars. Like they'll see you, but you don't see them. And I'm coming into this clearing, and immediately there's a jaguar there, and the jaguar just looks at me and walks right towards me and walks right past me. Yeah, I got it all. I'm just staring at this thing, and it's like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" It's like it didn't even care I was there.
If they're not hungry, and they're masters at catching caiman too.
Oh yeah, they're
Yeah.
really good at it. Their teeth are scary.
Yeah, they're terrifying. Mark was telling me that one of the workers had gotten attacked in one of the digs a few years before that by a jaguar, and it was like they could not get it off of him. They hit it with hose and shovels and everything else until finally somebody managed to get a rifle and shoot it in the back, and it just kind of jumped off and did a little spin and then took off into the jungle. But it came back, even wounded, like the next day, and tried to take the guy because they were so far out in the jungle that they were trying to get him out of there, But it tried to finish the job, and so the next day they shot it and got rid of it. But very vicious predators, and of course there's crocs. People don't know this, but there's actually crocs in the water. So anyway, and piranhas. But there's some pretty nasty things there in the jungle.
That alone was just crawling around, not even. Just,
Oh God, the snakes and spiders are horrible.
They're aggressive too. They don't.
Yeah, very aggressive.
The jungle
And
sucks.
The jungle does suck, man. Yeah, because I was reading a story about the Oswing in the Filipino jungle the other day. It was sent to me by a colleague that I had reached out to, and he was like, "Yeah, go ahead, use the story." But I got to finish getting it fleshed out. But it was pretty terrifying. What it did. It just kept on until it killed this soldier. But anyway, I mean, and that's in the jungle in the Philippines, But here in this jungle, you have all this other stuff, But anyway, so folks, you got to understand something. It's a scary place, These ladies, they go down to the creek, and one of them, it was almost dusk. She said that there was something up in the tree. It jumped down. It moved really fast. Looked like a shadow, and it snatched up her friend. The friend disappeared. She was gone for a period of 7 days. They found her down by the creek exactly 7 days later. Her body she was almost gone. And her story was crazy. This being had taken her to this underground cavern and was just using her as food. And the being was a big, tall guy. Now, I don't think it was this main one, but it was getting more and more younger. And here's the weird thing. One of the bodies that was taken during the dig of these mummies disappeared. It was the tall one, the 6'7" one, not the 8'9", but the second tallest one, which would have been his son. According to the legends, too, the villagers claimed that it was passed down by the Mayans that eventually usurped the Olmecs, that these beings were supposed to stay there until the year Reed 1, which was 2012. So if you move them before that, which they did, it would unleash these creatures, and they would do all kinds of horrible things. Wackiness ensues, and, all hell breaks loose. They were not supposed to be moved. The Mayans were well aware where they were at, and they had these markers that were put up. They know this because the stone that was used as these markers with the notches were very much Mayan and not Olmec. They believed that they were a warning, basically saying, do not go here, because they believed that these creatures could attack you. They were bound there with their bodies in their spirit form. Now, this was according to a Mayan medicine man that lived over there in this village. He was actually the uncle of Marcella. Now, get this. If she's 91, how old do you think this guy is? And according to them, these people are very, very, very long-lived. And according to Mark and Sandy, these people may even be some of the longest-lived people on Earth. But nobody knows about it. And I'm not going to say one way or the other because I don't know. I don't live down there. I haven't met these people. They live in fear of these vampires, these creatures that we would call vampires. They don't call them that. They call them I don't want to butcher the word because it's a Mayan word. But the word basically means like long-lived immortals. Like they don't die, and you can stop them and you can do whatever, but they'll come back as soon as some stupid person takes the metal dagger out of its chest and says, "Hey, I'm going to keep this silver here. Let's just take that right out." And Mark was like, he goes, the person that pulled it out, she wasn't even thinking. She just grabbed it. He's like, and when all this stuff started happening, he goes, I asked her, he's like, why did you do it? She goes, I don't know. I felt compelled. He's like, I just felt like something was making me do it. And then the day after day, more of these mummies that they had unearthed, they had them closed up in these heavy sarcophaguses. How did they take the lids off? Nobody knew how this was happening, but two of them disappeared from the sarcophaguses. One was a male, one was a female. Both of them were weird looking, had the weird features, and they had the metal was removed from them too. They were killed in quite the same way. But here's the weird thing. The woman that was taken and was nearly bled to death, she ended up in the hospital, and the being that took her he could speak. It wasn't like he was just being quiet. He told her, he's like, look, I just need to become, whole again. And so I need you to take me to more people that you're willing to let me. So he was polite about it. He was just like, I'm just going to drink enough, to where I can come back and raise hell. Can you just help me with this project?
Really, I could go after criminals and bad guys. I mean,
I could literally be a superhero. You don't even know. You don't even, with my abilities.
We got a thing here. You could be my sidekick.
Yeah.
Here's some nunchucks. They're made of bone. Don't let it alarm you. But human femurs, But she was, she was like, he was, I guess polite about it. Like he was like,
was he speaking English? Or
no, he was speaking in Spanish. Yeah, he could speak their language, And she was just like, he was definitely not a Mayan. He wasn't Spanish. He was not. He looked like a white guy. Like he was light skinned. His eyes were ice blue, according to her, and his hair was brownish, like, light brown, almost blonde. But he looked like a freaking, whatever. The big one, the tall one, that one was seen over and over again. But the body was never moved. It didn't disappear. It stayed there. The other two bodies actually disappeared. Well, that's kind of weird because like their bodies are gone. They're actually, whatever. When this big one was being seen, he was being seen like this wraith, like a shadow. Because Mark, thinking on his feet, went back and he placed the silver all back where it belonged and shoved the silver rod or whatever, the sharpened rod back into, what's the way he described it as a sharpened rod, back into his chest. And him being Catholic, he decided that maybe, well, his wife was. He wasn't, he admittedly was not really religious, but his wife was. And they prayed over it. They laid a silver rosary over him and they kept him at bay. I'm thinking, that's my words, not them. I'm thinking that that's how they brought him to heel, So this being was out running around raising hell, but he was doing it in the spirit. Like he was, his son, and they had a name too. Like the son's name was like Amazad or something like that, or Azamat. Or so I don't want to say his name because it's probably invoking some crap or something. I don't know what I'm doing. But anyway, he had some kind of weird name, and he was out running around in the physical flesh form. The scary thing about that too, folks, and I'll tell you right now, he was never found. So he's probably still running around out there, 6'7". I mean, how many European basketball players do we see in the NBA? I mean, he could be playing for the Mavericks for all we don't know.
It could be Jovic.
It's just like,
So we should suspect any very tall white person of being
6'7". Yeah.
Is it Luca?
Luca. Yeah. I mean, who knows? But his dad though, they said in the descriptions that they were given of people that would see him in his physical form, like they would see him as a wraith, but then he would take the human form. He was more of a tawny skinned colored person. Like it was weird. And I don't mean bronze. Like tawny is in like, he looked almost like the color of a puma or something. Like his skin was sort of yellow. The female that disappeared was very dark. So it was weird. Their skin tone they didn't all match. I don't know why that would be. I'm not real sure. I know that there are beings that people claim that there's an entire city underground where everybody's green. That would be from copper. Like if you have more copper in your body, in your bloodstream, that would make sense because they're often seen around copper mines. And we could do a whole show about that, about the green people. If you look up the story of the children in England, I mean, I'm not going to get into a whole sidetrack there, but because this is the podcast, we only have an hour. But there's these children that were found from the inner earth, and they were green. And then there are people who've claimed to go to these underground cities where they see these people that are actually green, and they're often found adjacent to copper mines. It's a weird thing, but anyway. And in one of the stories we did on Sunday, we talked about that fey creature or whatever that was green skinned, that may or may not have been the guy's mother from a past
Fairy
life.
godmother.
Yeah, very weird story. Check that out, folks.
It's a really good show.
It was, and he had an encounter with a werewolf in Scotland, or Dogman, whatever. But anyway, check that out. That guy's name's Corey. He is a really cool guy to talk to. I've had fun talking to a lot of these people. It's been pretty interesting, and I enjoy reading their encounters too. So if you have an encounter with something, no matter how bizarre or crazy, send it to me. So Mark told me, he goes, there were several victims that had turned up from this village that either had been deceased. There were two that were found deceased, completely drained of blood, or they were going to the hospital for severe anemia and having to get blood transfusions. And eventually, this went on and on until these people supposedly from this big museum that collects things when they find it. I have my own theories about what they're doing. Go back to the Serbian werewolf. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you have a problem? Yo, we'll solve it. We'll take the sarcophagus and no one will ever see it again.
We'll leave you with the ghost, though.
Yeah.
All the demons and troubles we'll leave with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all good. But they go and they take these sarcophaguses and they take these creatures. So they ask the question too, like, where are the other two? These people that came, now Mark said he didn't know who these people were. They were working with the Mexican government. They came and they were very adamant that there should have been two more. They knew there should have been two more. And they were like, they were talking kind of panicky, like this is a problem. Where are these other two? And then they asked him a million questions. What could have led to these two escaping? When they worded it like that in English, he said, what do you mean escaping? And then the guy said, oh, my English not so good. Now I know speak good. Uh-huh. I know speak good English now because you figure out what we're doing. So he was like, dude, what does that mean? You use the words escape, and they're like, another person came up and was like, oh, he knows speak good English. He means disappear, whatever. And he's like, well, I think it's kind of weird that you worded it that way. I mean, what does that mean? Well, they went through the jungle, combing the jungle, and they were hearing gunfire night after night for about 6 nights. They were in and out of that area, helicopters, everything, looking for these two mummies that had disappeared. Giant vampiric mummies. I'm not even joking, folks. This is not a joke. This is not a made up, haha, whatever. I'm being serious. And so what are we to believe? I mean, they took these things and they disappeared with them to take them to who knows where. They could be in Timbuktu for all we know. But, the predation on the local population, it sort of, stopped, but then it started up near a major city. And according to Mark, he said that there were actual accounts of people running into these beings and people seeing these things, these big, tall entities, but they were starting to look more and more young, like younger people. The stories were turning into...
they're feeding more.
Mm-hmm, like they were becoming like, and then blending in with the population. And he said, I asked Mark this, and I said point blank, I said, Mark, you got to tell me. I said, do you think that these beings were vampires? And he stopped and he goes, this is exactly what he did. He goes, yes. And I said, okay. And I said, what do you think they are now? He goes, blending in with the population. He's like, one of them would be considered a very tall woman. But I mean, she's the one that disappeared would have been 6'1". Or I'm sorry, 6'3". He goes, so she would be considered a very tall woman,
Shouldn't be hard to find in Mexico.
Yeah.
Come on.
But they probably didn't stay there. And then again, they could have gone underground,
Yeah.
And then, according to the legend, too, the Olmecan kings were actually from the sky, right? But they always seem to have these chambers that they built under their little ziggurat pyramids that go deep, deep down in the earth. The deepest one that they found was like 1.2 miles down in there. So you figure that they had these technology to go, and they like to stay out of the sun. That's weird, right? So what are we to believe? I mean, when you look at some of the Olmecan statues, the heads of these statues, they have a very African look about them. Have you ever seen these? These heads, they have like this really like wide nose, these full lips.
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah. But then there's these other ones. I think it was near Tula, I think of the name of the town I was reading about, where they have some where they look very Caucasoid, like Caucasian. And they don't look like the Mesoamericans. They look like black or white people, which is odd. And then you had some where the eyes were very Asiatic. And you're just like, what is this? I mean, I think to me, it speaks to the fact that our ancestry was quite mixed up. That's why I wanted to get Robert Kreider on the show so we could talk about some of the things he was talking about. Mm-hmm. And he's actually going to come on in a couple of weeks, folks. And he has a theory that these beings, like they had people digging and doing all this mining, and that they could have been here in the Americas, but been from as far away as Egypt or Persia. And they were all kind of in their own groups, And then you had the Polynesians who just seemed to like jump in a canoe and just go, I'm just going to go across the ocean, see what's over there. And then they're like, oh, here's some other weird people, let's breed. And nobody did it like the Polynesians because they were all over the place. I mean,
they had to be crazy because you were just basically going, well, I guess I'll just go see if there's something there. Hopefully.
I had a friend that was Samoan, and he was like, we were talking trash back and forth in a friendly way, and he was like, he liked to fight, and whatever. And so did I. And so we were talking trash back and forth. He didn't mess with me, but he would mess with other people. And he was just like, he's like, man, he was talking to this guy. He goes, I'll get in a canoe and follow you 3 states over. He goes, you think I'm joking? How do you think my people ended up out there in the middle of nowhere? And I thought that was funny because I was like, actually, it's in your blood to just go and get in a boat, a little small boat, and just, Now there's a boat and there's a book. You should read it, folks, if you have the time. It's called Kon-Tiki, Kontiki. These guys, I can't remember the guy's name. It's like some Svalbard Vorgensen or something. He's some Norwegian guy, right? So he builds this boat, this little raft, and he goes all the way across the Pacific Ocean to prove a point. And I'm like, wow, you win, dude. Like, like hands down, dude, you win. Whatever your point was, you made it, bro. Yeah. Like, seriously, go read it, dude. The guy, he went all the way across from like California to Japan. It's like unbelievable what he did in a little bitty boat. In the Pacific Ocean, ain't no punk. That's not a pond, bro. That's a humongous thing. I mean, the Atlantic Ocean is kind of like, it's not even that big, especially now with the Mandela effect. It's like they shrunk it down to like kid size or something.
So Pacific is even bigger now.
The Pacific is just like, there's like 8 countries that, like the size of the United States you could just put, back to, it's like humongous. And you're just sitting there going like, this guy's like, I'm going to prove a point. I'm going to get in this boat and prove that they could do it. I'm like, dude, little did he know just, decades later, DNA testing could just prove that 100%. So you did a great thing. You did an awesome thing. You proved your point way back before DNA testing, but now DNA testing just means that you did something crazy. But still did it. It was awesome. But so the Polynesians were there. I mean, they obviously came and they probably interbred. But these Olmecan leaders from going back 4,000 years ago. Now, if the story allegedly, this is just a story until we could prove something, and we can't. But if it's to be believed, and of course, Scotty comes. I call him Scotty, but he comes highly recommended from my friends who have been doing this for a long time. I've known Ben for a long time. I know his son now, and they've all been doing this for years. And he said, dude, if Scott says it, he goes, I believe it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if this is true, the people who were in charge back in like, were they vampires? And were they from under the earth, or were they from the sky like they said they were? Who were they? Because the Mayans were so convinced that there was something bad that they put these little stone pillars with these notches that only they know how to read, that says basically, hey, screw off, there's some evil stuff here. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, it sounds like obviously this guy was betrayed and murdered. I mean, a stab from the back.
Well, maybe he was killed because he was nuts.
Well, I was going to say
maybe he was eating too many people. I don't know. I mean,
but what could have killed him? That's the even scarier part.
I mean, you said it.
Scorch marks.
You said it yourself.
Yeah, what was it? Freaking lightsaber?
Energy weapon.
What
maybe?
is that?
You said yourself that like the ones that they did see all had like really weird skin tones and like they didn't match.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that the Olmec's gods all looked different, or they like looked Caucasian, white, like they didn't look like one race of people.
Yeah,
I think the Olmecs probably treated these things as gods and eventually got sick of it when they kept draining them dry, and so they eventually killed them.
But I don't think the Olmecs themselves could have done this, because they were killed. The ritualistic laying of the silver and the metal that was put, the silver that was put in the chest, that could have been done. But what about the split open of the back and the ribs and the burn marks? And it was perfectly cut too, the way they said that when they observed this guy. They did tests. They came back with testing to whatever facility they took it to. He goes, it didn't come back with any. A colleague of Mark's had that guy, Ray, the guy, he told me about it, and Ray said, look, he's like, we tested these, beings. He goes, I got the paperwork back. They were get this. The first place where they went was a facility in New Mexico. Now, I'm not saying this is where they went because I have no idea. It's just purely speculation on my part. But Dulce comes to mind. I mean, they came from the sky. I mean, I don't know. I'm totally spitballing here, folks. I have nobody told me this, but Ray told me that they had, gone to New Mexico. That was where the mail came back from, was New Mexico. Now, I did throw out the idea of Dulce to him, and he said that the address, I'm not going to give exact anything because I said I would just be vague, whatever, but about 45 miles from there. But he doesn't think that was their final resting place. He thinks that they got taken somewhere else after all of that. Extraction of DNA possibly, or who knows. But then again, Ray, you could just be a government shill.
They could be in his basement.
You don't know what – you're on the payroll, boy. You don't even
He
know.
took them all and put them in his basement.
Hopefully Ray's not, because then he's like, this guy just on the payroll. We got to whack this dude. He's on to me.
He exposed me.
How did he know? I was so careful.
I was so careful telling him all that information. But then again, who knows, man? I mean, I don't know what these things could have been.
I like just going through like some ideas in my head, like of what could have happened, trying to make sense of it all. And it's like different scenarios are coming up. It's like, oh, are these guys like aliens that got stranded here and then were eventually treated like gods? And then the alien space came, or like were they not maybe stranded, but maybe are they like renegades or like traitors or something, and they escaped to this planet?
Yeah.
And then maybe they were treated as gods, and those things came back and were like, nah, you're done for. And they just did all that.
Maybe other beings,
Yeah.
like from the, like other aliens killed them.
That's what I'm thinking. Or like
maybe because they were vampiric. You remember we did the one episode where there was a woman who had told us that she was a woman, I think, right? She had gone into one of these, there's a lot of these pivotal shows where we refer back to, and that was one of them where she had said that she was on a craft and it was like a warehouse full of like weird creatures. And one of them was like this winged demon looking Nosferatu thing. And the alien told her if that thing got loose, it could literally wipe out the world with it. It carries a plague or something like a parasite or something. Because vampirism could be, I'm going to say this, folks, and this could be true because you think about the Vril and all the other weird stuff. Vampirism could be something that happens throughout the galaxy.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not an insane idea when you're talking about
parasite.
It's a parasite. I mean, that's basically it. So, like, it's not an insane idea to think that other creatures, or it could be affected, different versions of vampirism. There's different types of parasites. There's thousands of them. They all affect you different ways, but they all kind of do the same kind of thing. So, like, what is basically a vampire? It's a creature who takes life by drinking blood. So, I mean, it's not a very difficult description, and it's very easy for, like, different things that could fall into that category. An immortal being who drinks blood, that's what you would describe a vampire. So, like, the idea that there wouldn't be maybe something out there that if they're, like, a planet that has fully all vampires, like, maybe they succeeded or like if
think about this though, Tony. What if like there's a planet that's been completely usurped by them, but they just go out into space, other places, and find other planets to eat. They don't have to stay here. I mean, they have to stay wherever, and I think
it would be a lot safer to have like a planet full of the same beings, and you don't have to worry about like rebellions, revolts, or anything like that, because you're all the same kind of being, and you just go to different places.
You just colonize other places.
That would explain why they're so hated, because like they're literal
like vampire Vikings,
yeah,
space Vikings. They land on Earth, and the first thing they do is try to get taxes from them, like the Vikings that landed in the Saxon official came out. Okay, now that you're here, chaps, you need to pay taxes. They're like, hey, we're more here to just plunder and raid, but we'll start by killing you. I hadn't planned on that.
I was hoping to sell my furs, but I guess I'll just take your skin.
I'll just kill you since you're asking for money for nothing. They're like, let me get this straight. We give you money, you give us nothing. That's basically what taxes are. It's basically theft, folks. I mean, seriously.
No, it's the worst thing.
Yeah, well, no, I think vampires would be the worst thing. Taxes would be number 2.
No,
I'm going to leave you with this, folks. There was a lady her name was Mary Beth, and she gave us a story about one of her dogs. This was crazy. This was near not Stephenville. Where the prison's out there in East Texas. Huntsville.
Not Beaumont. Oh, okay.
Huntsville, yeah. Well, Beaumont's one of them, man. But she lived right outside of Huntsville, and she had a dog that she claimed was attacked by a flying humanoid. I haven't told this story before, and she thinks that it turned into something. And the way she described it, she didn't tell me, oh, my dog was a vampire, but I thought about that, and I was like, that sounds vampiric, because this thing went out and it killed chickens and started drinking their blood. The eyes glowed red in the dark, and eventually her husband had to dispatch it. It was like Old Yeller meets Dracula. I'm not even joking. I mean, and so I talked to her very briefly. There was another guy named Templeton. I'm not going to say the rest of his. That's what he went by on the email. Something very similar to that with his cat. I mean, so this is a parasite. I am convinced, 100,000%, that there is a vampiric parasite that can affect anything living.
I think so too, and I think it's more difficult than that. I think there's a vampire disease, and I think there's actual races of vampires.
Yeah, that spread it, carry it, because you got animals like raccoons that carry rabies and skunks, but they're not affected by
armadillos. Aren't affected by
leprosy, yeah. But we are. Well, folks, that's time. That's all the time we have for tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning in. It gives you food for thought. That's what we do here at Paranormal Roundtable. We scare the crap out of you with food for thought. I don't know.
We ponder your nightmares.
Yes. You opened the podcast. We came. Welcome. So, folks, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. For everybody here at PRT, don't let the vampires bite. Good night.